Hey everybody, I'm just snacking on some tasty pecans at the beginning of this. It's a good day for snacking, I think. And I like to take a moment when these things start to kind of let people trickle in. I apologize for starting a little late today. There were technical and personal difficulties, which led to a postponement of beginning of this talk. And I have to be honest, like when I picked this topic, I had so many ideas and I wrote some of them down and I can't find my notes. So a lot of this will just be kind of, I think, a non-linear discussion about this subject. And I welcome the audience, obviously, to participate because I think I'm still learning about this subject. And I know I'm not alone in that. A lot of us are trying to figure out through life how to do things like that are difficult with a degree of elegance, grace, and humility. And yeah, it's hard. So I kind of wanted to open up a discussion about it and kind of talk about my experiences with it and what I've learned, that kind of thing. Well, it's also providing a nice place to explore this stuff for others too. Hi, Jude. So I guess first I'll ask how everybody's doing. And I would just ask too, like, let me know in the comment section if you've ever had to deal with this matter of like severing ties with connections. And you know, what it taught you. Years ago, or a couple of years ago, I had two cats, and it was hard taking care of them. And I had a partner who wasn't very helpful at the time, like, you know, usual. I tend to have situations like that in my life where, you know, there's just always been since childhood elements of like toxicity from the people closest in my life. And, you know, you think it's normal, a lot of things, and it takes a lot of growing up and experiencing the world to start to come to terms with how sometimes abnormal some of the things that you have tolerated are, and how other people just may not. And a lot of times, I want to be like clear with like children. A lot of the times, children don't have a fucking choice about it, whether it's toleration. You're just in this scenario that you can't get out of in terms of the family unit. And then outside of the family unit, there's no protection either. Man, if this guy was the MGTOW that you describe, Nicole B., I wonder like how you had a connection in the first place. It's interesting to me because like when I was younger and doing YouTube videos in like kind of a different, more communal way than I kind of do now, Although I've always tried to have a communal element to my channel. Um, you know, I had a lot of subscribers who were like these men's rights activist types, you know, these like MGTOW kind of formed after. There were like the true forced loneliness guys at the time, like TFL. Those were like the, I guess, the crazy fuckers that were, you know, single and it was women's fault, right? I had a lot of those guys watching my shit. And it was so interesting because I think with people like that and people who are like in specifically like men who are drawn to like these extremist views, you know, what they really want is to be connected. You know, it's very clear like they're hyper focused on like women. It's in it. They want to have a connection with a woman, but they don't see women as people. You know, they believe a lot of like myths about women and they're angry that women don't meet their myths. And so they're in this like hyper spiraling, enabling community that keeps telling them, yeah, all of your failures are women's faults. So what I see with those guys a lot of the time is just a lot of really, really sad, lonely fuckers, you know? Hmm. I'm being silent right now because I'm reading your comments and I think there's a lot of good stuff happening in the comment section right now. So I want to thank you all for like showing up and participating here. I didn't know that, like, I mean, I don't know about this situation with MD. I don't really know her that well, although, like, I have talked to her from time to time. But I mean, yeah, I think it's important not to date people who espouse like really, really, really bad ideas. That's important. Like, I think values are really important. And when it comes to like severing ties with people, for me, it's always come down to values. At the end of the day, it's like, does this, when I cut somebody out of my life, and like, this is very severe language, but when I say no more to someone, it's like our values don't align. And it's actually hurting me and my integrity to continue on with whatever charade of like a relationship is going on. And I think when we come from like a place of trauma, a lot of the times in our like deepest kind of psychological places, it's hard to see that that's what you're doing a lot of the time, overriding that. Um, and there is such a desire to be connected too, because like, you know, I also have to like look at my life too. You know, I've had people cut me out of their life, like just stop talking to me without any kind of like indication. I've also had people tell me that they were cutting me out of their life because they don't like me type of shit. So I've had that too. Or like they don't like the way I think about things. So therefore I'm canceled. So I've had like stuff like that. But ultimately that was about values too. And we had different values and it's all good, right? Yeah, so sometimes, like Shot mentioned, like somebody who has a drug habit, sometimes you can't deal with someone. Like their issues are such that you can't really help them. And associating with them is going to like harm you, you know? So sometimes it's that serious. Like maybe somebody's a criminal, right? Or reckless. Or maybe somebody's like behaving in ways that like are really jeopardizing others. I think those are those are like the times when it's like, you know, socially acceptable to say no more, right? Like it is hard. I also thought too, because I was having a conversation earlier today with someone who's been like, who has been a toxic person in my life, you know, and, you know, I've been a toxic person in their life too. And we've had to like, or we have decided to, with that understanding, continue to relate to one another because there's a level of awareness about one another that is helpful. Like, I want to talk about like the whole concept of being toxic too, because I see everywhere that word thrown around. Like, what is toxic? And yeah, people can be toxic. But I also think that like sometimes we can choose in those circumstances to, I guess, see how somebody is behaving overall. And that's kind of like where I'm kind of like figuring out what the right thing to do is. Now, I know that I feel very strongly that like people who are are hurting and who are not in a good way and who are lashing out, they sometimes need they do need people in their life who care about them to be there for them. And just because somebody is behaving in a way that is inappropriate sometimes, I mean, you have to like take the fullness of the situation into consideration and like look at it objectively. And I think part of what is needed when cutting ties is to look at the situation not from your own perspective, but from a perspective that is not your own feeling, but like sometimes people say in terms of like taking care of yourself that you should treat yourself like you would treat a really dear friend. So like if somebody was treating your really dear friend that way, how would you interact? How would you feel about it? How would you interact? That's another way. But I think that can be trouble too, because like I said, like I have chosen in my life sometimes to keep people who I've had negative experiences with because there's been growth. And that's where it comes down to for me, like when does a relationship cease to be valuable? And I think that's when growth can no longer occur. Because one of the hard truths about life is that the people that we love the most, and it's a total fucking paradox, and I'm not the first person to notice this. I remember, God, what was it? I'm not going to remember who it was, but if I come across this video again, I will share it. I know James Baldwin was in it. I can't remember the woman he was talking to. But they were having a conversation about how, like, we give the people that we love the most in our lives, like our family members, our dearest friends, our community members, they really experience the worst aspects of us, don't they? the people who are like our enemies in the world don't tend to get that shit from us, do they? Like the nastiness, the pettiness, the mean comments, the digs, the sour, just negative energy that sometimes people can have. That seems to be delegated to our loved ones a lot of the time. Like the people who don't deserve it at all, the people who deserve like the nice parts of us. So part of this is like about, yeah, it's about recognizing that. So I've like had to like look at myself over the years and be like, when people won't talk to me or won't interact with me, like, you know, maybe they just didn't get anything. Maybe they're not getting any growth from me, you know? Maybe they can't advance where they are with me. Maybe he said that in the interview, but his shot asked, is that the Baldwin Love Takes Off mask quote? I don't know if he said that though. It was like a conversation. I don't know. I mean, Laurel Ann P says part of it, I think, is it safe to put down our masks around loved ones. I don't think that's always true. I think our loved ones are the ones who can cause us like the most damage when we do take off our masks. We feel safer too because we feel that they'll see us. But yeah. So anyway, I'm kind of thinking about it. I mean, I've had to like, right now I'm like really in a state of like wanting more boundaries in my life and wanting to be more separate, wanting to be distinguished, wanting to be my own person. And I'm really, really kind of like feeling really severe a lot of the time and like making decisions to just like cut ties a lot. Because I just, either I don't have the patience for people, I don't have the energy, I don't, or mainly I don't have the values. It is what it always comes down to. It's like the values. And sometimes I think, I mean, when we talk about cutting ties is like a really severe kind of thing. For me, it's like when somebody disappoints me, like not like they fuck up, because people fuck up, but like when somebody like just isn't who I thought they were, they do some shit that's just like so out of character of like something that like is okay to me. That's when it kind of, I get to the point of like cutting ties, where I'm just like, no more. Like there's just no more. And what that means to me is just withdrawing my energy. And I may say something or I may not. And that's been present. I've also had the cutting ties where I've had to like tell someone like, yo, I can't interact with you anymore because it's like harming me. And I've also had, experiences where so yeah, I think I've experienced it from multiple angles is what I'm saying, because I've already talked about like having people cut ties with me too. And sometimes it's just like, it's really weird. And I'm wondering if I should talk about like online kind of dynamics to a certain extent here, because online communities seem to have this element of they easily become toxic because people can really, I mean, you don't have to face the consequences for what you say to people, right? Generally, there's a level of anonymity that you get to have, and you get to present yourself in certain ways. So, I've experienced like situations that like were kind of abusive, and what ended up happening was like needing to like cut ties with like whatever community. Yeah, like so online communities is an example. I think we all have experience with that. I mean, because cutting ties is not just about cutting ties with people that we've had relationships with. It's also sometimes cutting ties with communities, identities. Like, okay, here's an example. I was around the age of 25. I had been part of this organization for like 5 years, and I had like learned a lot and grown in it, and I started to develop political differences. And it took me a while to like come to the point. It actually required like a discussion. And that experience was interesting because that was a tie cutting as well. So like I lost my attachment to that community. I lost my identity that was based on the community. Oh God. I wanted to respond to Looper in the comment section, who apparently got here by doing a search for talk. So hi, nice to see you. Thanks for showing up. I have had the same situation that Nicole B speaks of, which is like being ganged up on for like saying the wrong thing, and the kind of like, I mean, I've had those experiences where it's just like this nastiness comes out of people that is just, whoa, where is all this hostility coming from? And like, why are you sending it to someone who's a stranger? I think that's the danger kind of online communities. But I mean, I know this happens in interpersonal communities, and I think so. Yeah, cutting ties from communities is another kind of example of like where we kind of separate and go our separate ways sometimes. So we were in a community and then it didn't go right. Or like, recently, like it can be so dumb, but like I chose to leave a meme group that I've been in for a long time because I just didn't like the kind of creeping right wingism that I started to see. So there's an example. Like, I was just like, this isn't in line with my values. I don't want to be here seeing this stuff. And that was just like a personal choice to, again, protect my space and energy. But when it comes to like relationships with other people, I was talking about someone in my life who like had gotten into a kind of crazy situation last year and how I chose not to like remove them from my life. And that was an interesting conversation because the person I was talking to was just like, oh, well, whatever. It wasn't really hearing me. And then I kind of just made the statement like, I love this person. And because I love them, I'm going to see them through times when, they're behaving badly, and like I would want someone who claims to love me to do, right? Because I think that word too is kind of important. Like when we tell someone that, like, and they've been decent and there for us and not like kind of abuse that, it's a time to say, sometimes you, like I said, take the whole situation into context. Like, does this person just need you to be a friend? Maybe they're behaving in a way that's toxic, or maybe they're behaving in a way that's not in line with your values. But maybe if you're a friend to them and get them to see the error of their ways, things will shift and change, and they'll be stronger. Your relationship will be stronger, and whatever you do together will be stronger in the future. So sometimes, I mean, there's also an online culture too, and it's just, and because online infiltrates so much of real life culture nowadays, there is also a culture of just like being blasé about this concept of cutting ties, like just, cut them out, cut them out, cut them out, burn those bridges, burn those bridges, burn those bridges. And I think that can sometimes enable people who have destructive tendencies to like not see the value in their relationships sometimes. So when we talk about this subject, I mean, it's there's a gravity to it, I guess, that I want to mention, because people aren't replaceable. We get that message a lot of time. People are replaceable. They're not. Cutting ties with someone is a big fucking deal. When you say no more to someone, it's a big fucking deal. When you say don't contact me again, it's a big deal. It's not a small thing. So yeah, there is this kind of like culture, I think, that the internet has helped kind of fuel and maintain around like just not giving a fuck about our relationships as much. I mean, sometimes I don't know how to talk to people in the comment section because I feel like I have to, the group that I mentioned where I talked about creeping right-wingism wasn't a feminist group, but I do find it really disappointing that feminists are willing to tolerate homophobes and racists and bigots of all stripes, just so that they can, I don't know, get some laws passed that actually really don't empower women anyway. Like, you know what I mean? It's upsetting to me. A woman being fucking prime minister doesn't change. it doesn't change the condition of women globally, or like having these laws, like they don't change the fundamental dynamic of like men being in power as a sex class. And it just seems like such a waste of fucking time to negotiate with men when women need to withdraw from men. It's like, so to me, like, you want that shit to change. You want women to stop being prostituted, then that's what's going to have to happen. And it's just like not happening because all the women that are into this stuff, like for the most part, are not willing to live without men. So, I mean, I've had to cut ties with that too, because it's just like, okay, like we're just not on the same, we're not on the same trajectory. But anyway, yeah, this was a mixed community that I'm speaking of, so it doesn't really even apply to this. But I don't have time for like that shit. Like it's another thing because when you let the right wing in, what do? They go after the radicals. Period. Okay, women like me get isolated. We get fucked with, seriously fucked with by people, and I can continually say, I continually am trying to make this clear to you that I have been fucked with by these people and I am not the only one, okay? And I am just a little YouTuber, okay? And I mean, I've done like, I've done other stuff too, but like when my activism is disrupted by right wingers, okay, that pisses me off. It affects me. And it affects other women that I've seen. And it's just like, well, despite the level of energy and effort you put into creating women's culture, you're on your own with that. It's just like, there's no concept, but you'll come here and you'll watch this and you'll participate. Like, I don't want that. I don't want that kind of support. It feels gross. That's why I have the evil eyes here. I don't want evil eyes on me. Anyway, and I guess maybe this is for me too, like cutting ties with, I've had many experiences with like different I just like often when I don't feel heard, that is another time when I feel like I have to leave because not being heard is part of like not being respected. And it's about not being like seen. Like it's just like, what's the, why? I need a moment. See, like, I don't want to fucking talk about this subject or deal with it at all. Like, this is something I would like to cut ties with, when I'm talking. And of course, it comes up now. I don't want to be associated with any of this shit, And it's like, I feel so uncomfortable. I feel so uncomfortable. And I just don't know how to like, I feel uncomfortable. I feel these are the things like asking yourself how you feel, I guess. Do I feel safe? Do I feel uncomfortable? Do I feel like I'm consistently and this is what I've had to do. I've consistently had to override my feelings about this stuff. It's just like, I don't want to be in that state. I'm not like, why? What was the point of being a fucking radical then? So that I could be like every other woman that's like overriding her feelings about what she's seeing and experiencing. Like, well, that person is using their anti-surrogacy argument to attack gay men instead of just attacking surrogacy. Let's just let that go on, or like, you know, that was an example recently, right? Just of things that like I see going on that upset me. But it's okay because they're gender critical, even though they're like heterosexual, very gender critical there. And fuck that term too. Anyway, let's move on from this. Let's fucking move on from this. Let's cut ties from this. I have a different set of values. Period. So that's that. There's nothing more to say. I'm not, people like me are not the fucking means to an end. Hello, Achan. Let's talk about, sometimes there's loneliness that happens when we cut ties because we may have been immersed in a lifestyle that went along with a person or a group of people, and then what happens there when that is removed from our life is like sometimes a feeling of emptiness, which can be called loneliness too. But like when we are invested in something, and this is when cutting ties is hard, when we were fucking invested, like learning to be whole again. Because oftentimes when we have to cut ties, it's that some part of us has been sucked out, sucked dry, if you will, like the empathy factor. Sometimes women get so attached to that empathy game where it's like, I understand, man, that's rough. Oh, and let me tell you, so much of this comes down to like women's relationships being about venting. And I struggle with that, not because I vent a lot, but because oftentimes when women speak to one another, when we talk about our lives with one another, or we talk about our struggles, I've found that most women don't want to change. Like, you give them advice, you give them pointers, and they just are like, I just wanted to complain. Or like, those toxic relationships between women where we're like, call up your mom and complain, or vice versa, like just to fucking complain, not to like get advice, not to like strategize, but to fucking complain. That's the worst. And I think that's one thing that like it's really hard to know how to like work around, but that's becoming more and more of a thing in my life where I'm just like, no, I can't be in these circumstances with people who like, don't want to actually change the circumstance and like just dump toxicity, because when people talk about things sometimes, like we don't think about it, but like when you're listening to really negative, defeatist horseshit over and over again from someone, it's not good for you. It isn't, because it gets in your brain. I'm trying, y'all. I'm like trying to be like I said, this is a subject that I knew I couldn't speak about linearly. And yeah, dealing with trolls is like on top of it. He had a lot to say about what women can't do. Yeah, a lot of ideas about all the things that women can't do. What a small world that person has. Do I think people are cynics pretending to be optimists? Jeez. I think most people are cynics just being cynics. um, yeah, I mean, growth is important in people and individuals. And I think like that for me is like the one thing. It's like, is this person growing or not? Like in terms of talking about, is this relationship growing? Is this circumstance growing? Or is it festering? And when something festers, when something is rotting, when something is no longer alive and it is decrepit, you got to cut that shit out. And that's a really, really, really hard thing to think about. Looper loop, what do you mean with help you with specifics? What am I trying to do? What do you mean? Did you read the? I'm trying to talk about cutting ties. It's pretty simple. Jesus Christ. Saturday night is interesting. I think it brings out the trolls more than anything else. Yeah. Is the person willing to grow, or do they just want to lean on you? I'm trying to talk about cutting ties with people, places, and things in a way that is sporadic. No, I'm just talking about the phenomenon in general. This isn't about a specific group at all. It's not specific. It's about like this phenomenon that happens in our lives. So the request is that people share and talk about this for themselves. Like, do you have experience with having to sever relationships, you know, of whatever kind? And like, what are the reasons why? Like, because it is a difficult thing and we don't really talk about it that much. Like, you know, what happens when you remove yourself from this? Yeah. Maybe not that, like, do they drain me or not? Do I feel like I like to think about it because, you know, I read tarot, like, is my cup being filled here or is my cup getting dumped out, you know, with this interaction? Because, you know, sometimes too, I've been in like circumstances, like groups, whatever, projects, and it's like, man, this is not feeding my soul. This is not making me better. This is not putting me in a better position in life. This is actually making me worse. And you have to like recognize that too, I think. That's part of this is like, is holding on to this for whatever reason, is it making me a better person or a worse person? And what does it mean to be a worse person? I think it's like how, because my thing is like, how authentic am I being? How much integrity do I have? And what does that mean? It's like, am I being aligned with my values here? Am I like walking my talk? Am I comfortable with where I'm at? Like, do I feel like I'm negating some of my values? Because that's one thing I've struggled with is like, especially like when it comes to groups, it's like, how do you accept others and where they're at, when there's a antagonism, right? Yeah, this shit's tricky. So I hope that this conversation that we're having is like, I hope that it's giving one to something to think about. Like Nicole B is mentioning a friend who's sick and how she's taking more than she, can give. And sometimes people in our life go through things. That's what I brought up a friend earlier who was going through some shit, and I was like, despite that I'm upset about XYZ, I'm going to put her well being, right, before my feelings about that because I know that she would do it for me, right? I mean, that's another question. Like, would they do it for you? Would they be there for you? Are they there for you? And for me, a lot of the things too, and I've been very vulnerable in my life to like really, really disordered dynamics because like I brought up at the beginning, like trauma and kind of coming from a dysfunctional background, right? So when you come from like dysfunctional dynamics, you will remain vulnerable a lot of the time, just because you accept things as normal that aren't. And it takes a lot of, like I said, experience to see it. So I think the main thing to do, and the main way that we can, be true, the main way that we can like make these decisions is to always like be true to ourselves. If you can just like put yourself and being true to yourself first, then like you'll know when something isn't right and you'll know what needs to happen. Yeah, some people can be supportive. Yeah, sometimes people are supportive when you're going through these things. H. Han said this, I cut ties with a female friend for that very reason. Prioritize being a fun shit lord troll over integrity and self-actualization. Right. Right. I've had the same experience. It's happened to me recently. I was just like, this person is not, you know, well, like people like that can't really give you an honest friendship because, like, if you feel if they can't be like themselves and honest in their behavior, like no friendship that they offer you is going to be like that good. Oh yeah, if you feel like you have to lie, that's Nicole B brought that up. Feeling like you have to lie is a good time to leave. That's too, like, I've also had moments where, like, if I have to tell a lie to someone in order for things to be smooth, Like, ew, what is that? Smoothing things over? That's a toxic relationship trait. Part of like cutting ties sometimes is learning how to not be toxic ourselves. Because, it's like sometimes we're the toxic ones. And what we're experiencing, like, as I talked about the show on reflections, right? Sometimes these dynamics where you're like, okay, I need a break here. I need to cut ties with this. I need to move on with my life, right? And how things are working out, and we're just like, whoa, this is not, it is telling you something about yourself. It is telling you something about yourself, and like the fact that you're in this and that it has gotten to this point, like that is a time to be like, okay, how am I toxic? Like, what am I doing to enable this situation? How did I make this situation grow through my own often overriding of self, or wanting to smooth things over, or playing nice, or try. A lot of the times there's also a lot of messages about like, because I talked about there being messages about like burning bridges being really popular, but there's also a lot of messages about just like not intervening and not like stepping in, or like not speaking up. Like their conformity is, I think those kind of messages are a bit more subtle, but we all know what happens when you don't conform, right? And like you kind of step out and you say, that's wrong, that's wrong. Hey, hey, why are you doing that? What happens to you then? You become the target, right? So that's a message in and of itself. Like when women stand up specifically and say like, that's wrong, all the eyes turn and point at her and try to shut her up, and then like a few men will like take her ideas and like go run with them and like profit off of them usually. So looking at that and thinking about that is important too. Like what is the message you've gotten about this subject? I also see people a lot of times like compulsively cutting ties and just like not giving a shit. Those are people you have to watch out for too. Like if they don't care about the fucking wreckage they're leaving in their path, like that's a problem. Like, whoa, like, and then, you know, not being accountable to anyone, but like, or being available only on their terms is another thing. Daria said, is toxicity relative? I think so. Sometimes it can be. Sometimes it's kind of objective, like, whoa, that's just, you can look at a situation from the outside that you're not involved in and be like, that looks fucking toxic. Um, so many trolls tonight, Jesus. And they're not even funny. Like, fuck. A compulsive tie cutter should be the one who speaks to the manager for the group. work is the ultimate conformity thing. I mean, yeah, in terms of like the workplace, you consistently need to conform to some sort of standard that is like, going to not disrupt your workflow. I mean, I think there's certain circumstances where conformity is a good thing, but it should never be valued above like decency and like greater values. Like conformity is always something that is, I think it's something that comes up in most group dynamics, though. It doesn't, like there's always this kind of push for everyone to conform. Someone said something about how groups should have like something about different people. I'm gonna like look it up again. What was it? One accountant, one creative, one manager type. I disagree with that. Okay. I think it's important, especially if you're talking about like a group of women. All right. And this is one of the things that I think I mentioned, like talking about like the group I was involved in my early 20s. They made an effort to teach you a bunch of different things. So you may have had your skills that you came into the organization with, but you were expected to develop new skills. And I think that's important. Like everyone in a group should be able to make a flyer. Everyone should be able to like create a blurb, everyone should be able to like read the accounts and understand them and kind of like take some responsibility for the finances. Because when you don't, like, and people get kind of bailiwicked into their roles, like, first off, you're not learning anything, but also there's like a lack of accountability that comes in, and people get really complacent about their work. And also like skills aren't being shared. Like, how do you know you can't do a thing until you try? You don't. So, yeah, these like they're not even trying. I can't really be that interesting to troll either. I don't understand it. Anyway, let's take a deep breath. Where have we gotten with this talk? I feel like in terms of most of the talks I've done, this isn't the greatest. It won't go down in the history of my work as the greatest talk. But I guess I want to do a check-in. Like, how are you all feeling about this subject? And is there anything that we should also discuss with it? Nicole B says, I think hyper-specialization leads to a lack of awareness about the world. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think too, like we underestimate the qualities of leadership often are about being the one who does something, right? And if you have skills that you could teach to someone else so that when the time comes and they're in another circumstance, like let's say, yeah, this person like learned from you how to like make a flyer, all right? How to make a flyer for an event. This person learned that from you. They go 5 years later and they're in this group and they need somebody who knows how to make a flyer, right? If there wasn't an effort to like give people new skills, and to share knowledge, sharing knowledge has an effect. Like, I don't use the skills necessarily, all of the skills that I learned like at the time, on a regular basis, but I have them if I need them. I can drug them up. I have these experiences that have like informed my awareness, and this awareness has expanded my world. SB said something about that, being glad that I brought up compulsive tie cutters. Let's talk about that a little bit more too, because I've had a kind of interaction with one in the past year or so where, like, part of why I cut ties with this person, right, was because of how I saw them behaving with a lot of other people that disturbed me. Like the willingness to cut ties and also like not be accountable for anything was like disturbing to me. And sometimes it's about that, like cutting ties. Sometimes it's that people don't want to be accountable. Like, oh, I did this to you. Well, I'm just gonna block you and move on with my life. That's a problem too. And I think kind of our culture now gives people an ability to kind of treat people that way. And that's another issue. That's like, it's important to I think it's important to cut ties when it's right for you, but it's also something that should be considered. And it's also something that one should take stock to look at yourself about, like, I'm in this situation, right, where I feel the need to cut ties. Is it ego? Because I think with compulsive tie cutting, a lot of it is about ego, and the lack of wanting to be accountable is like not wanting to admit wrongdoing. Just from what I've seen, I think there could be other reasons too, which is just maybe like it could be like issues with connecting with others. Yeah, I mean, like Nicole says, if you cut ties much, maybe the problem is you. Like if you're continually in a situation over and over again where you're cutting ties, the problem is you. If any experience you have, all right, that you continue having again and again, there's something wrong with you. You shouldn't be having the same experience over and over again. Like in terms of like interpersonal dynamics in relationships, like you should learn your lesson and then when the time comes around, act differently. We actually haven't discussed sirens. We haven't discussed cutting ties with family. So I want to thank who brought this up, Malcat talking about this. So yeah, let's talk about cutting ties with family, because I've had periods where I wouldn't say cut ties, but where I haven't spoken to family members just because I didn't want to, because there was like a lot of stuff I needed to process. Or like I was angry about how I'd been treated or something. And, I grew up pretty, like most of I was raised by my father, and I grew up kind of isolated, from my mother's side of the family. And I've only reconnected, in the past couple of years to them. And so like this, and there's a big family there. There's tons of them, that I'm like just getting to know. So I grew up in this kind of disjointed way where I was separate a lot of the time, and I didn't have like a lot of the connections that like a lot of other people seem to have, like those close familial connections. So for me, like not speaking to a family member, it wasn't as big of a deal. It was like, well, that's normal. And my dad's side of the family is like very reserved and like very while I will say they've been there for me when I needed them to, like, there's just it's not close like that. So, and that's, families are all different, but so I'm talking about this to kind of give you a perspective. So like, yeah, I did a video years ago. Somebody asked me for advice about how to live without a family, which I was trying to figure out at the time. And yeah, I kind of like in that video, I think the advice I gave was good, but I also felt I got a lot of feedback on the video back when I was allowing comments, because I did at the time, about like, how you won't live as long, which is true. Like all the statistics, like family, I think I've said it before, it's like the building block of our society is the nuclear family or the patriarchal family, however you want to look at it. So living outside of that is going to come with challenges, period. Like there is a stigma attached to it. Like, oh, you don't, or like, too, I think I'm actually reminded too of, there's a really important chapter that I think everyone should read from Dykes Loving Dykes, which is available on Bev Jo's blog. You can go read it. But the section on the family is really important, I think, for feminists to look at. And not just feminists, anyone who wants to understand kind of the way in which the family has this power over our psyche. Because a lot of it is about that. People think if someone doesn't associate with their family, that it's because there's something wrong with them. Because obviously, we are attached to our families, culturally speaking, like you are considered to be an extension of them in most cases. So either there's something wrong with them and you don't associate with them, so that means there's something wrong with you, or there's just something wrong with you because you can't seem to coordinate yourself into this social unit based on your shared genetic like material. I think people who choose to live apart from their families because of bad dynamics or abuse or just a level of toxicity in the relationships are really brave, and like making the choices to say, like, even though this person is my relative, I'm not going to like allow them to hurt me or hurt anyone in my life or allow them to put that shit on me. That's brave. It really is. It takes a lot. Yeah, they do. People assume you're the problem, and you lose social status for it too, I want to say, and that's kind of what I got out of reading that piece from Dykes Loving Dykes, the section on the family. I think it's called Patriarchy is One Big Unhappy Family. I have not read anything that comes close to dissecting what is wrong with culturally our attachment to the family as a unit. And another thing too is like people are often valued less if they don't have good familial relationships. They're considered to be less important, and oftentimes, one example of this is even with like dating and things like that. Like women who they mention, like women who have close familial ties are more highly sought after, right? Because there's a level of like comfort and respectability you're going to get by being welcome and accepted, right, by your family, which a lot of, especially, it's still a problem today, but like, they're writing about dykes who are people that consistently, historically, have had trouble with their families. So these dynamics especially affect lesbians, but also, like, can we talk about women living on their own for a while? I have known many women who, have their own, they live on their own into like middle age, and people don't like it. They get spied on by people, they get checked in by people, like neighbors. They're like trying to figure out, why is this woman not attached to her family? So that's another thing. Cutting ties with your family, sometimes it's necessary. And it's brave to do that. This is interesting. Looper said, so most of my life I've been alone with my thoughts. Relate hard to that. It made me wonder if philosophers are philosophers because they don't know what to do, and not knowing what to do makes them sad. I don't think anybody knows what to do, but I think philosophers, for me, like, and part of why I like think philosophically a lot of the times about these things, is that I think every answer that we get in life brings with it other questions. And I think a lot of this conversation, there's a lot of paradox here, because I said, like, well, maybe a person is being toxic, but you still choose not to get rid of them because you've been toxic too. And then there's like, you really have to read situations fully. And sometimes with people and like relationships, sometimes we just commit. Like, I'm choosing to do the work with you because I have enough faith in your humanity. Like, I think that you are going to be strong enough to take my criticism, and also strong enough to give me some. That's also the test of like a true relationship, is like, can you insult the other person? Like, can you tell somebody how they're fucked up? Like, and if you can't, then it's not a genuine relationship, I would say, because there's a level of, I would say, hierarchy there, but also like inauthenticity. Again, it gets back to the question of lying. So many people lie, and I've definitely had issues with it myself, like where I've been a fucking liar, and I'm just like, oh my god. Once I catch myself, or I know what I'm doing when I do it too, but those times when I've lied and had that little feeling like, why did I do that? Why did I say that? I've had like, when I ask myself, like, why did I say that? Why did I do that? That answer is really important. That answer is really important. Why? It's not so much the fact that, because you can be like, oh, I'm a liar, I'm such a bad person, oh, why do I have this bad habit? Or you could be like, yo, why did you do that? Why did you feel unsafe to tell the truth in that moment, really? Why did you feel unsafe to tell the truth? B. Rosa said something interesting. Relationships aren't only one-on-one either. Yeah, and this is where I've struggled too. I think we all do. I once cut ties with someone while everyone around me essentially pretended their behavior was okay. It made me feel like a crazy person. I have had that same experience where I'm like, I'm not gonna fucking tolerate that shit. What the fuck is this? Like, are you fucking kidding me? Da-da-da. And everybody's like blowing smoke up this person's ass, being like, yeah, you're great. Da-da-da. What you're doing? I'm like, am I just like, yeah, it does make you feel like a crazy person. It makes you feel like fucking Cassandra, doesn't it? Like, this shit's happening. I see it happening. Nobody else sees it. I'm not taken seriously enough to apparently be heard. Or they act like you're fucking dramatic or something. Yeah. Yeah, and this is too, it's like if you're in an environment like that's another thing. Like you cut ties with someone because you're like, whoa, that's fucked up. And you see around you like the fact that other people are complicit. And then it's like, well, how many relationships am I gonna have to cut here? And that is a maddening thing too, because then you're the one who gets isolated, aren't you? You're the one who gets isolated. And this is how radical women this is consistently how radical women get fucking isolated and essentially neutralized. It's like through stuff like that. I talked about this like once with like last year seeing like someone who had been like promoting anti-porn ideas, for example, and then like had been bragging about going to the Playboy Mansion and how cool it was and how cool Hooters was and like how fucking hot this chick on Tinder was or whatever the fuck, like that kind of shit. And I was like, am I crazy here? And yes, I was treated like I was crazy. Yeah. That's another thing too. Yeah. Friends who won't stand up for you. Cause then you're looking at, oh wow, I've got to cut a lot of fucking people off here. Ooh. And yeah, you're isolated. But you know what you have? Then you have yourself. And like when we talk about like loneliness, not having yourself and consistently being inauthentic just so you can have other people around or having people around you who don't really know you or get you, it can be some of the loneliest, most isolating, most gross, like just feeling, like, and to me it's not worth it anymore. Like it's just like I'd rather have like one or two friends than like a bunch of like acquaintances. So, Lady Solidarity said, what if cutting ties with someone is more dangerous than maintaining the relationship? That's hard. I mean, this is another circumstance. It's like with cutting ties, what if that is the case? Then you have to look at managing, because with some people in our lives, like, and those of us who've had to deal with people who have like maybe personality disorders, there's no getting rid of them. All right. A lot of the time, there's only like managing. And so what you have to do is like look at how to make yourself as uninteresting to those people as possible. Like that's all you can do. How do I make myself completely uninteresting to you? And that's what you have to do. And with that, they'll if you're not interesting to them, they'll remove themselves generally, or they won't be around as much. So But that's kind of another kind of thing. Because yeah, sometimes it isn't safe to cut ties with people. You cut ties, then they're coming for you, right? So I mean, sometimes you have to quietly cut ties too. Talk about that, like silent tie cutting, like not even letting somebody know, just like quietly slipping away, like ooh, quietly turning your energy elsewhere, quietly trying to just. And sometimes, like let's talk about blocking for an example, okay? Because blocking is something that we do a lot online, and sometimes we block people who, we may know, or who whatever we can't give this person access to us, right? We're just like you don't get to have access to me, right? But when you block someone, that doesn't mean they stop existing, does it? They're still out there, they're still doing their things. Sometimes they can still hurt you. Yeah. So yeah, that's that's something to think about. And I think, putting that into like talking about this, like what do we do when we can't cut ties because a person isn't safe? And to cut ties would create like a whole other slew of negative experiences with this person who, yeah, this is cat time. You want to give people the purrs? Look, you're on camera. You want to tell them about the time you cut ties? You want to tell them about that? Um, you know, so like you create your boundary with a person and then you manage around it, and you also keep stock of the person as well and what they're doing. And yeah, like I said, just be as interesting as possible and strategic, and like set limits for yourself. And this is where like, you know, this is where like having a plan sometimes when you have to interact. So let's say you have, because I have a friend who has like a really toxic sibling, right? And has to figure out like strategizing, like, what do I do? Because like the family is, a lot of families don't want to deal with it, and they'll continue to enable your abuse. So yeah, having a plan, communicating your boundaries, and just like sticking to them. Someone asked about how Nero's feeling. He is feeling well. He has a lot going for him. He's got a bunch of new toys lately. He's got a new cat tree. His mouth is great. He's learning to use his mouth. Like he's like picking things up and carrying them now, especially when we're playing. It's one of his favorite things to do. Um, he's got a ton of energy. And he's a happy little guy for the most part. Trying to have him on more adventures, but you know, he's well. So, ow, stop. Planet X says, I try to avoid those that seem spiteful and vengeful. They're dangerous. Watch out. Yeah. I mean, paying attention to how people treat others, because, like, how they treat others is likely how they'll treat you. Like, they have a disagreement with someone, how are they acting? Because it's highly likely that when they have a disagreement with you, they'll do it. They'll do you the same way. Yeah, Nicole B said something that's interesting. keep an emergency stash of money if you live with a toxic person. I mean, I've had to live with somebody who was really toxic for me, you know. I've decided to maintain that relationship because there's been effort to grow and change on both ends and like to work through the issues in a more separate way. But like the living together situation was toxic and that needed to be changed. So, Loop is leaving. Goodbye. Thanks for showing up to the channel, and it's nice to have you as a subscriber. So yeah, having your own money is important because oftentimes with like toxic living situations, the money gets intertwined and like it's really hard to separate. And like people, well, some people like really thrive on that. Like, well, let's get into this too, because this is kind of tied to codependency and why I kind of wanted to talk about this subject because it's come up in terms of the nature of like discussing relationships and responsibilities that we've had with this show that I've been doing. Learning to be different in relationships is hard, and like a lot of people don't know how to relate independently to one another. They need someone to like manage them or facilitate them, or they're only comfortable if they can facilitate you, but there needs to be a dynamic of intertwinedness, especially around resources. So yeah, if you are in a toxic situation, having your own private stash of money is important. And one thing that I suggest that helps me save money, I opened a bank account, right? That was separate from my main account. And I just put a little bit of money every paycheck in there. You know, I set it up so that like I would just have this stash of cash when I needed it. Unfortunately, though, right now in most cities in the country, rent is really fucking high. So for a lot of people, they're trapped in situations. I've had to live with an ex. I've known other people who like live with their exes, and there's just like all kinds of like bad vibes in their like living space a lot of the time, or people aren't allowed to use their living spaces. You know, I've had like roommate situations where they made it so uncomfortable that I couldn't be in the main areas. I've had that happen several times. Like a lot of these issues and how we handle them and strategize them, it's important to talk about strategizing them and like, you know, how do we deal with them? But ultimately, like these problems are like really bigger than you and I. They require economic solutions because for the majority of people, you know, they're intertwined not because of like some sort of personality flaw, but because of the real nature of poverty and like of also just the economic situation they're living under. Someone said, yes, people such as siblings taking advantage of what the society assumes the nature of the particular relationship is. Men in particular shoving the support role to women, whether they're family, relative, friend, or coworker. Right? That's very, 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 very common. And there's also the expectation, like, what does it mean to be a sibling? What does it mean to be a friend? What does it mean to be a lover? What does it mean to be a wife? What does it mean to be a coworker? You know, I think getting clear really about what you expect in these relationships and what you expect of others, like what you expect of yourself, what you expect of others, is important too. And if your expectations and needs aren't getting met and there's like no effort to, then like, and you've communicated it, like, get out of there. All right, my kitty is being playful. Is there anything else we want to talk about with cutting ties? I know this conversation has been a little, disjointed, but I think it's one of those conversations that is kind of disjointed. It's not, you think about one thing and then there's this thing over here, and oh, this reminds me of that, like, or oh, I read about this, That's kind of how I'm thinking about it. Let's talk about, okay, I've got an idea. Like, I mean, we kind of talked about like political reasons for cutting ties with people, right? Like, you know, um, and there was kind of some like talk about judgment. I didn't really catch all of it in the comment section, but like, how do we feel about judgment in terms of cutting ties? Like, I think there's an element of judgment that comes in because you have to make a judgment, like, but it's not okay to be judgmental, right? It's considered to be a bad behavior. It's considered to be toxic. So it's interesting because it's a behavior that will oftentimes, it's what you need to like cut a tie. Like, you do need a level of judgment. Like, yo, I'm judging this to not be acceptable, right? This is not acceptable to me. And saying that, like, that's a pretty bold statement. So how do we feel about this in relation to judgment, I guess, is what I would like to discuss a little bit. Just from other people's perspectives. There's certain things that if somebody does, like, I will block them. Like, there's certain, if somebody crosses a line with me, like, I will block and I won't even like discuss it. There's just certain things that, you know, just aren't tolerable. Like, if somebody tries to manipulate me mentally or gaslight me, that's just no. No. I won't, because that's a dangerous person right there. There's no reasoning with somebody who's willing to like play psychological games with you, you know, or like try to like mess with you that way. Like, that's something that's like, yeah, it just is your there. What do you say to someone like that? Because like, it doesn't matter what you say, they're going to manipulate. Like, they've already shown you that. So it's hard. Like, if somebody's just like that, I guess, sneaky in their dishonesty, like, that to me is just like no communication, just no. Amenti, the writer media, said, I've cut plenty last year. If I'm not feeling their vibes, I cut them off quickly. That is respectable. I'm trying to get there, I have like this, like, I'm, I have, how do I put this? I'm kind. And a lot of the times when you have that quality, people just, they see it as weakness. And I'm trying to, like, I want to maintain my kindness, but also protect myself. So I'm kind of like learning. Yeah, I'm learning that kind of now. Like, this is not good. Like, I don't feel that. Like, is this person like aligned enough for me to be giving them this level of compassion? That's the other thing. Oh, Leah's here. Yay. And said something very true. Psychological games are a form of emotional manipulation and abuse. So yeah, that's a just no. If I feel psychologically you're fucking with me, you're out. What did Amenti say? I also feel out the energies around people, and that makes me cut people off too. The energies around people matter too, because like what's around you is a reflection of you, which is another reason why it's important to cut off people that are just not they don't fucking get you. They don't get you, right? They're not on the same page as you, like, because then you have people come in and they see like, wow, this person seems okay, but they're surrounded by buffoons. Like, birds of a feather flock to fucking together. It's true. And Amenti said, I've had people attack me on a spiritual level, even my children. You have to cut people off. They will bring their madness to distract you. I'm serious. I want to talk about this too, because a lot of this for me and a lot of how I've kind of come to this position now where I'm like seeing things in a very different light. And like I said, you know, looking at some of my relationships, like this can't continue. I have like a lot of it has to do with like spiritual work I've been doing over the past year or so, like being consistent with my practice and like, you know, just trying to engage that aspect of myself more in a way that's like real, and isn't just like playing with the medium, but like actually like I have a practice. I show up every day. I do these things, that kind of thing. That shot me like it got people were coming for me in some weird ass fucking ways once that started to happen. Like people had already been kind of fucking with me, but like once that started to happen, like people just started exposing themselves. In many ways, like I feel like some of the like high vibe spiritual kind of energy I was inviting into my life was exposing to me the like level of unawareness and like spiritual sickness in others too, where they're just like so unaware of like how they're really behaving or like what purposes they're serving. So I want to say thank you to like saying that people when they do see you growing and becoming a better like I would say better version of yourself, a more spiritually aware, developed version of yourself that's like trying to move through the world in alignment. People see that, they will come for you and they do test you. They want to bring you back down if they can. So cutting ties is essential. If somebody isn't supporting your growth and is actually trying to prevent it, watch out, because there's a devil inside them. A mentee asked me, before that, Nicole said, can we talk about gut feelings? I think we should. We should. And also Planet X mentioned people that enjoy winding you up, but not in a nice way, not in a jokey way. Like, no, yeah, people who like are, I had it earlier. Like, I feel like some people I've had come to my channel and this is why I stopped allowing comments, because I was having like such twisted shit said to me. And it's like, how obsessed like could you possibly be with trying to hurt a fucking possibly stranger? These people might have known me. And that's another thing that I worry about too, because with like the comment section, there's a whole level of ability for people to be anonymous and do things anonymously. Like they can just put up a fake name and say whatever the fuck they want and like say things that they know will hurt you, but put it in a way that's like nice, or like say things to diminish you. It's horrible. So yeah, I mean, that to me too, like cutting off the comment section was like not allowing people who had been abusive to me another space where they could do that, because the comments were public, so people could read that and be like, you know, allowing those negative vibes around me or at me wasn't good, and it wasn't good for anybody reading it either. It's poison is poison, okay? Poison is poison. So I got asked about my sign. My sun is in Capricorn. So I recently had a birthday and it was awesome. Had my solar return, another revolution around the sun, another big kind of fortification of the role I'm meant to play in society as a Capricorn came back to me. So that was cool. And I have also seen, I've seen a lot of YouTubers. I've been on YouTube for a long time, Amenti. I've been on YouTube for like 10 years at this point, or no, 12 years, since 2008. I have seen and I have been through, and I've been made sick by the negativity that people can have sent to them online. So I want to say totally, like, for anybody watching, like, if you're like concerned about putting your boundaries up and saying no to shit, like, no, okay? Somebody hands you shit, you don't have to take it. You can like walk away and say, I don't want that shit. And, you know, part of like choosing not to engage or allow people these ways in which that they can harm you is a part of that. I mean, and people still troll my freaking like live streams too, though. Like, I understand that too. And what I would say to those of you who feel like you have thoughts coming, like after the fact, can you share the video somewhere else with those thoughts? And that way you're promoting this channel, you're promoting the good things that come here elsewhere. And you're talking about like, because I mean, part of the whole purpose of this channel is like, and the trajectory is like, let's heal, let's grow, right? Spread the good stuff, right? You're having these ideas come afterwards, and I do too. Like, part of the reason why I've embraced like the live stream thing too is just to kind of, apart from challenging myself to be more or less one dimensional, but also it's part of challenging myself to like, you know, be okay with not saying everything or not saying things perfectly. Because sometimes like we don't always need things to be said perfectly. What we need is like just a bit of authenticity. Like when we're across the room from someone, like only a part of what we have inside of us comes out. So I'm kind of trying to convey that more too to women, because yeah, a lot of are afraid to speak sometimes. And like, if I show you what it's like for me to actually speak more directly, I think that's helpful too. So that's been part of like why I've been doing this way. And dealing with distraction, stuff like that. Anyway, enough about my process, right? I just, you know, after some of the experiences I've had, you know, and the kind of negativity that I've had thrown my way, and just interference with my work, which continues continues to baffle me, I guess, which is why I like make that face. And I have trouble talking about it too because it seems so strange. Yeah, I want the conversation to be taken elsewhere. I want the conversation to be taken elsewhere. It's time now. I've had enough of these conversations with people about like the content I produce and like what I have to say as a woman, right? What I want from you all is to take it elsewhere and like to spread these conversations and like also to introduce others to like something that might be healing for them, which is like engaging with this channel and its ideas. Um, yeah. So I mean that's my hope. Menti said that Capricorns really have to stay away from people. It's true. They will be jealous of your dedication to success and that you have a Jupiter Capricorn. That's awesome. Yeah. My Jupiter is in Aquarius, which is why I kind of have spent so much time focusing on like these social issues. You know, there's this witch doctor I follow on Twitter called Witch Doctor Alex, right? And he said something the other day like about how people kind of give him the criticism that he stays in his beef, right? And I thought about it, and I looked at kind of some of the beef that I saw him going through. I haven't seen all of it, and I can't be in that. I can't be like what I'm going to say is like I don't have all the facts, right? But I do have what I've seen, and what I have seen, and like his case, and I've seen in my own case, the beef that we get stuck in is so oftentimes it's so much bigger. It's about such bigger issues than what we're currently discussing. That's why I think we get stuck in it sometimes, and we get stuck in this like conflict kind of thing, and wanting to figure out the conflict because and to talk about it so much. It's like we have to address these bigger issues, and like, you know, as spiritual folk, as like, you know, for me especially, like how do we work out these issues, you know, how do we understand that like these greater social issues are also a part of like the spiritual sickness in our world, you know, and how do we address that as people are also trying to survive within a competitive capitalist system, who are also trying to do our spiritual work. I don't know, I'm trying to figure that shit out. So I want to respond to our Korean sisters who's here, and I want to thank you for watching, and all of my viewers from South Korea. I've like learned so much about myself and about like what I desire, you know, in terms of like feminism from a lot of you. And I have seen this too, like from like feminist content creators from Korea, just the ones that I've seen, interacted with, like it's a problem everywhere. It's a problem everywhere. And like the people who are most likely to harm you are the people closest to you. Period. So like it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. But yeah, women consistently, once you start to get real, when you start to get real, talking about real shit, talking about like the, you know, what's underneath this, you know, like the family issue, right? Women being seen, or people generally, because men who cut ties with their families are seen as like less, they're seen as fucked up too. Like, but again, we don't know why if somebody cuts ties with their family, I assume it's because they've been hurt a lot by those people, right? So we brought that subject up, right? Looking at that and like, why is it though that we have this tendency culturally to look at the victim askew? Why do we, I want to say this too, like making a positive choice to like cut ties with someone or groups of people, regardless of they are, that are harmful to you. That is a step of like, that is stepping out of victimhood, you know? That is stepping into power. It's taking your power back. It's saying you don't have the power to do this to me anymore. And that's why it's important, and that's also why it's like so culturally loaded, right? Because I don't know, the whole setup of this society is up and down, you know? Up and down. There's people that are up and there's people that are down. And when the people that are down dare to put themselves up through their choices and actions, you know, a lot of stuff comes for them. That's just a reality. So you have to just keep like putting yourself and your own well-being, you know, first. Raging how the men are just allowed to take advantage of their signs while women don't need to comes down to being aware and watching out. Well, what women need to do comes down to being aware and watching out. Right. We're here because we recognize it. We've watched you grow for years. The energies have been really bizarre for a while now. Well, it's very nice for people to watch me grow for years, isn't it? That's a real privilege too, to be able to like share my growth process with the world and like some of my messiness in it, you know, because a lot of it's not been good. A lot of it's been like through, whoa, I fucked that up, you know. So I appreciate those of you who are like, you know, continuing to like stick with me and like see where this is all headed. Hey, baby. Oh, there was the thing about gut feelings that came up earlier that I thought it would be cool to address, but I kind of skipped around on the subject. Gut feelings. Isn't he wonderful? This cat, you're so wonderful. You are so loved. People love you. You know that? Not just me. Everyone that meets you loves you. Even people that don't meet you love you. So, gut feelings. When I have a bad gut feeling about someone or something, nothing really convinces me that it otherwise. Like, I have never been proven wrong. Okay, let's just say that. When I get that feeling of like something isn't right, it always comes out that I was right. You know, we're instinctual creatures, and our bodies want to preserve us. They want us, you know, our brains and bodies do want to preserve us to a certain degree. And it's been hard for me too when I've been in the state like where I'm like kind of feeling crazy, like crazy lady, right? Because I see something or I feel something that other people aren't feeling yet. There is nothing worse. Like, there's nothing worse than having been right all along. Let me tell you that. Like, while it's like, oh, yeah, I was right, ha. Like, it's not really a fucking prize. It's really horrible to like see the car crash coming and not be able to stop it, but to be aware that it's going to happen. And I've had that so many times where my instincts are like, danger, danger. Like, and then there's also the circumstance too that, like, you know, I've had those circumstances where I've been like, danger, danger, right? And no one listened to me. And then the danger happened, right? I removed myself, the danger happened. But I've also like been kind of wanting to think critically too about myself and like certain situations. So like when I've dealt with paranoia, for example, because I think I've talked to you about this, like paranoia has been an issue for me a few times because of like things that I've been through. And then I have to like question, like, is this a trauma response? You know, I have to get really clear. Is this a trauma response? And yeah, like that's a hard question to ask yourself. Like, am I reacting this way because I'm triggered? And what does it mean to even be triggered? Because I see like this is another situation where people are such assholes, like on the internet, like making fun of people talking about being triggered. And like trigger warnings and that kind of thing, like, which I think is a little bit separate. I think it's a little bit separate, like trigger warnings, as opposed to like talking about being triggered. Because like recognizing our triggers is part of like recognizing how we get caught into the traps of like reenacting our trauma a lot of the time. And so for some women, like when we have like a trigger warning on like an article because it has some sort of graphic depiction of like sexual violence, let's say, right? For a woman in that circumstance, she may, after reading that, be reliving like in her mind, having like flashbacks of her own. And so that's why it's important to have like that warning there. Or like maybe you grew up in a household that was abusive, and so you were used to being gaslighted or walking on eggshells, and you had to navigate that. So you get a trigger that when somebody's like acting like weird, that, oh, this reminds me of that. You know, so, and now I feel the need to caretake, or I feel the need to withdraw, or I feel the need to like create a diversion, whatever your coping mechanism is. Like, it's important to like see these things, and when we're sometimes when we're going through dynamics as adults, like it's very easy to feel like that child that was like trapped in that situation with no power. And that's part of the reason why, like, again, I think that there has to be a level of liberation of children in this culture, because oftentimes like the most dangerous places for them is their fucking family, or like, you know, the only thing that their family can provide really is like shelter, but really what's going on is in fact toxic. So I do think that's a part of feminism, um, because, you know, girls are, you know, child women. So yeah, people are talking about, or Lady Solidarity said something about how being triggered has been made a mockery of. And it shouldn't be. Like, and I think that has, you know, that's part of the culture about like who is an acceptable target, right? Who is an acceptable target for ridicule? And it's like, okay, trauma survivors, nice, you know. And it's the same shit when like, I mean, there's like other groups that it's, it becomes socially acceptable within certain groups to like, make fun of or like diminish or like put down. I want us to think about like not putting people down in terms of like how we communicate our ideas, like does this uplift people who are victimized in this world, or does this help contribute to the further stigmatization? And it's really hard, sometimes I think sometimes being triggered is inevitable, but yeah, I also think that compassion is sorely lacking. It's sorely lacking, and that's another thing to look out for. Like, is your community sorely lacking in compassion? Wow, my kitty is chewing on me. It's awesome. Do some people have more or better gut feelings than others? Yes, I think some people's instincts are stronger than others. I think that's the case. I mean, some people don't have very good instincts, and there could be a number of reasons for that. Maybe they're on like a type of drug that might alter their mind, so they don't receive like their signals the same way. Or maybe they, have lived in circumstances where they have to override their gut instincts so long that they just don't recognize them anymore. That's the case with a lot of women, I think. Like, they don't even know what that uneasy feeling is, the bad feeling, they just. And I think that's part of where we talked about earlier, like the venting, dumping kind of relationships with women. Like, is the conversation you have consistently, or the conversations you have, are they consistently about problems with no attempt to solve the problems? Because that's a really, really common thing in female relationships. And when you don't do that, like as a woman, that's also considered a problem. And it's a way of like kind of negating your feminine role. And yeah, I mean, utilize your triggers to expand your consciousness. Always get curious. When something doesn't feel good, get curious. Get curious, because there's an answer for yourself in that. Nicole B said, I recently have had a gut feeling about my life path. Well, I would say that I think we know who we're meant to be, and I think we know who we are. And part of our cultural indoctrination within patriarchy and just this society at large is to forget who we are, to forget our wild self. And part of like the healing process for me is kind of getting back in touch with that, like who am I? What brings me joy? What am I naturally drawn to? Those kind of questions, because what am I naturally drawn to, and also like what is pulling me in life, like what lights me up. We're supposed to forget about that so that we remain like tamed, essentially. I mean, let's talk about this. And part of cutting ties, in a sense, is about being a little wild, right? Stepping out of line, refusing to be kind of a part of the machinery anymore. You're stepping more into your wild, authentic self as a human being. More like, whoa, hey, that animal self that's like, I don't want to fucking do that. I'm going to go climb that tree or whatever the fuck, like, or I don't like playing with you, as a little kid. I don't like the way you play. I think I'm going to go play by myself or go play with someone else. Or I think I'm going to go to the monkey bars, like that kind of attitude. you're taking your power back, and you're not letting like these arrangements you're in dictate your trajectory. I read something interestingly enough, and I shared this little image on my Facebook recently. That was a Hunter S. Thompson quote that had something to do with like how politics is an addiction for people, and how people like will continue the addiction and like or act like junkies when it comes to it. Like they do not want to give up their addiction, no matter how cruel they're acting, how out of touch they are, you know, how much it's all the fucked up things they're doing, you know, like it's just they don't want to give that up. You know, it's like a toxic habit. It's like it's an addictive toxic habit. And there is a high that comes from politics as well. I'm addressing like some of what Planet X said here about being pissed off. Like a lot of how people engage in politics is like a blind man's zoo, and it's just a toxic habit about like posturing and like winning and losing and like competing and like dehumanizing the other and like having fun with it. So gross. Nicole B mentions cutting ties with Christianity, which I also did in the past. Yeah. It's interesting to me now too, because I've tried to heal some of my baggage around like the Christian indoctrination that I went through, and try to not like hold like this really negative charge, but just see it as something that informed me like how not to be. Because a lot of my life I've just been like, fuck this shit, you know, like just, but that's not a good thing to hold either, because it's honestly, it's the same energy that I was trying to get away from the whole time, you know, like holding on to that, like, you're wrong, I'm right type of thing. It was the same attitude they had. So what I really want to be more like, you know, in terms of that is just like being conscious of what I didn't like about it, and trying to be like, I think, learn from it how not to be like in terms of cutting ties with Christianity, for example, or whatever religion someone wants to cut ties with, because honestly, like organized religion overall has a lot of problems that people experience. Yeah, I can totally relate. Being pissed off, Nicole, totally relate to that. Being pissed off makes me feel alive. How many people, I think so many people can relate to that. So much. I know that I've had that experience, like, or like being filled with like righteousness. Like, it's a high. It's a fucking high. You feel alive. You're getting high off of it, and it's like, is this the thing you want to get high on? You know, when you realize that you're like a junkie, and you're like, yeah. I think that a lot of yeah, that kind of dynamic is just so common. People don't even realize that they're chasing a high, you know, that you see it all the time. Like people, the way people get kind of vicious and sadistic sometimes online, especially, you know, in their comments and or like things they say to total strangers, or like the ways in which they'll communicate their ideas. You can see that they're getting high off of it. Like they're like, yeah, I fucking owned that person. I'm the big one. You're small now. Ooh. So gross. It's gross. It's like, it is a type of, yeah, it's a type of addiction. And like those type of people, in my experience, are never nice to be around. They do not, they are not healthy. Oh, there's a mention of immature idolization of political figures plays a part as well. I was having a conversation earlier today about how we expect politicians, especially, but any political figure, to be perfect. And like scandals are such a big problem. I've been watching kind of on repeat a bit the show The Thick of It, which is like a satire. It's like a British satire on the New Labour government, and kind of their PR media spin department. And it's really, for me right now, and especially in terms of like a lot of what I'm processing myself in terms of like my engagement with politics over the years and what I've been learning, it's just so interesting, like how I mean, they make these things very clear, a lot of the times, like the decisions that are made, like wear this tie, don't wear this tie, or he wore this, she wore that, like the kind of inane ways in which these people and even like other political figures, like activists, for example, have to present ourselves. No, baby, no. Hey, no. Oh no. Yeah, this is why you're not allowed up there. So yeah, anyway, I was talking about, yeah, so I've been watching this show just to give myself kind of like perspective. It's also funny and has really good swearing, so like there's that aspect of it too that I like. Um, but it kind of just points out like how ridiculous a lot of this striving for perfection and idolization of politicians is. Like it's so asinine and it's so contrived and it's not real. It's like treating we give celebrities like more humanity in a way than we do politicians. Um, that means that I think the political system in America is very broken. So there's that. I don't think we've had democratic elections in many decades, and like it's just so interesting, kind of seeing how people are still addicted to this despite these like facts, about the country at large. It's like you can't see the forest for the trees, right? You've got to get out of the forest, right? You've got to get out of the like being amongst the trees and like get above to actually like see the forest for what it is, And it's like some people never get there. B. Rosa said, I remember in a much older video you talking about making the conscious effort to not talk about men as much and to focus on uplifting women. It feels good temporarily, but is unproductive. Well, I'm sorry, I don't. Could you explain a little bit more what feels good temporarily but is unproductive? Do you mean like talking about like men and like the fucked up shit they do? Where it's like, yeah, like expose that guy, Which is the thing like with the whole Jonathan slash Jessica Yaniv subject, and like, um, how many people want to talk about it? I was like, well, I don't want to talk about these men. I don't want to talk, I don't want to give them any more attention, that kind of subject matter. Like they thrive on it, you know. It's hard though too. Like there it's so hard to know when you need to say something and when you need to just withdraw, you know. But I think too, like sometimes silence says a lot, and it's about what you take seriously and what you think is important. So, yeah. Anyway, I should probably get going pretty soon because this one's been going a while, and I want to thank you all for being here and like having this conversation with me. This is like not an easy subject to talk about, right? And I want to thank you, all of you who've like shared your ideas and experiences and kind of, talked about other things that are related to it too. Planet X said something. The nickname Obama the other day, was he that bad? I will say this, I think like I don't think it's possible to be in the seat of like president of the USA without being like pretty bad. Like you don't get to okay, this is a shit heap. You don't get to the top of the shit heap, right, without being kind of bad. Period. So it's like, to me, it's a question of like, how do we live in and amongst a circumstance that ultimately is very chaotic, and we live in a world where might makes fucking right, okay? Period. That's the reality we're living in. So like you have to be willing to set some boundaries and be willing to say, this behavior is not acceptable and not welcome in my life. Period. And if somebody crosses that line, cut them off. And if, I also think too, if you're wasting time and not growing in a circumstance, situation, place, community, dynamic, whatever, get the fuck out. Like, there's not enough time to waste. So, yeah. I hope you all have a good rest of your weekend. And you can tune in on Monday at 5 to get my Strange Messages show where I do, kind of channeled messages and also like play with tarot cards and talk about subjects kind of from a more like spiritual mindset and kind of get you to see like the greater lesson behind the matter. So yeah, thank you all for being here. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your weekend, and stay tuned till next time when I get on here and rap about something else. And keep it strange.